Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming. So thrilled that you've already started eating dinner. We are so honored to have a fellow CMU alum come and present today. And Nav is going to read Nancy's bio before we get started. Here you go, Nav.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. How is the food, by the way? Thanks a lot, Lee. So, Nancy is a compassionate product management coach who strives to inspire other product managers to reach even greater heights, empowering and guiding them to build on her learnings and soar. With over 15 years of experience in tech, Nancy has worked with B2C and B2B startups as well as large companies like Meta and Facebook. As a product leader, she has launched successful products that users connected with and driven long term growth. Nancy is passionate about making this sometimes overwhelming world of product management feel more accessible and enjoyable while being sensitive to her mentees' emotional needs and experiences. In coaching, Nancy focuses on compassion and grit, helping her mentees unlock their brilliance and find their best selves. With experience conducting over 200 interviews at Meta and Facebook and being part of hiring committees, she can offer insights on interview prep as well as career growth, including strategies for promotions and shifting between individual contributor and people management roles. Having been through it herself, Nancy shares insights and tips with other product managers from a place of deep understanding and empathy. Above all, Nancy knows that product management can be a high stress and lonely role. So she is dedicated to helping her mentees manage their well being and find balance. As an adoptee and immigrant, Nancy has faced her fair share of challenges and can offer empathy and support based on her own experiences. Together, she explores how to cultivate resilience and maintain wellness while tackling the unique challenges of product management role. Also, Nancy holds a bachelor's and master's in ECE from Carnegie Mellon University. So you can ask for discounts, I guess. Do they get any individual links for discounts and stuff?
Discounts for
Coaching and stuff?
Yeah, I can make that happen.
Okay. That's it. You have it, guys. And this academic background combined with Nancy's extensive professional experience enables her to offer well-rounded guidance and support for those pursuing and building careers in product management. So let's give a round of applause to Nancy.
Thank you so much. All right. So how many classes did you have today? Only two? It's not back to back? Do you have classes after this? That's good. Are you feeling tired or excited? Excited. It's 5 p.m. Okay, that's good. Because I was going to ask you to stick with me for the next 1 hour or so in case you have food coma or in case you're too tired from a full day of classes. But it sounds like I am ready for this very excited group. So before we talk about the actual interview prep, why do you think product sense is such a hot topic? Why do people want to know about product sense? Why are we here? Why are you all here? Why are you excited to be here?
Because you apply that in the product you work on.
Yes. What about the product sense interview raises questions for you? Have you started prepping for your product sense interviews? What makes you excited to be here?
Get to know the approaches of approaching a product sense question, like best practices.
Yeah. And how do you feel about your preparation so far?
So for me personally, we've just started classes, so we'll be graduating next year. So it's a bit chill as of now.
Okay, that's good.
For your next question.
So what have you been doing to prep?
Sorry, what was the question?
What have you been doing to prep for your product sense interviews?
Yeah, so I think there are some online resources. There's a book, How to Crack PM Interview, and there are some resources over Exponent. So just doing things like estimating different things like how many cars there are in New York, things like that, so you can have a better guesstimate.
That's not a product sense question.
Yeah, sorry. So for product sense, it could be like design YouTube, let's say for blind people, something like that.
Yes. Yes. And how do you feel about those exercises?
They're difficult, like, because you have to come with a framework on how do you structure your thought process, which just goes in all directions. Like, how do you bring it at one place? That's the difficult part.
Yeah. I would love to have this discussion with you and help you answer some of the questions that you have at the end of the 30-minute discussion. So, as you know, I'm also a CMU alum, and I graduated back in 2006. I started my career in engineering and became a product manager 5 years into my career. So I've been in tech for over 15 years. I was previously a PM director at Roku, and before that, I was a PM manager at Meta, and I was at Meta for 6 years. And before Meta, I worked at different B2B startups and B2B bigger companies. But before I made it into Meta, I have failed the Meta interview multiple times. And this was even after putting in over 100 hours of prep. And it triggers me every time I think about my experience because the preparation is not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to take you hundreds of hours just to not do well. So I know that I wasn't prepping the right way. And eventually I became an interviewer at Meta, and I've conducted over 200 interviews when I was there for both individual contributors and PM manager candidates. And I was also on hiring committee discussions. So now, after this long journey, which took many years, I know this interview very well. I know what the interviewers feel. Interviewees feel when they're prepping for the interviews. And I also know what the interviewers are looking for in these interviews. And I also know what the hiring committee is looking for. And I'm dying to share everything I know with you because I don't want you to have to struggle the same way I did. And that's why I'm super excited to be here and give back and just share my knowledge with you. We have to really understand what a product manager does. And that's because the product sense interview tests how good we are as a product manager. So, anyone in this room, what do you think a product manager does in 10 seconds? How would you answer this question?
Product manager looks for opportunities, market opportunities, and decides what to build and why to build.
Great. What else do you think a product manager does?
Always keep thinking about how can I make this product much better than what it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm. What if it's a 0 to 1 product? What do you think a product manager does? Great. No wonder I'm at CMU. You're all correct. So the first thing that product manager does is operating in the problem space. And in the problem space, this is where we're trying to define the right product. And we're going to talk about what the right product means. But we all start with the problem space, identifying the right problem to solve. After that, then we move into solution space. In the solution space, we are working with the teams to build the product right. And that's it. Product manager does not do anything else. There's only these two things that we do. We start from the problem space, and then we move into solution space. We decide what the right product is, and then we work with the teams to build it right. So that's your answer to what a product manager does in 10 seconds. So now let's talk about what makes a product right. What do you think? Tell me. Yes. and what makes a product have product market fit. Yes, it solves a problem. Yes.
Probably not just build for the consumers and what they need, but go beyond that so that they absolutely love your product and they become super unhappy once you stop building the product.
Yeah. So what makes the product right? Let's first look at it from the customer's perspective. It has to solve the most important problem that is unmet. You have to satisfy both dimensions. If it's the most important problem, but it's already met, then it's not the right product for the customer, or vice versa. If it's unmet, but it's not the most important problem, then it's also not the right product for the customer. So that is customer's perspective. And what's number two? If this is part one of making product right, what is part two?
Driving business goals?
Yeah, customer or a company perspective. So from the company perspective, for the product to be right, you have to meet business goals and you have to help the company differentiate. Again, two dimensions. You have to satisfy both. You have to meet the business goals and help the company differentiate. You can't have either or. If it helps the company differentiate, but it doesn't meet the business goals, then the company needs to shift. Or vice versa, if it meets business goals, but it doesn't differentiate, you're probably only seeing short-term growth, which doesn't give you the long-term sustainable growth that you want. So to summarize, what makes a product right? It has to make sense for the customer, and it also has to make sense for the company. So that is what a product manager does in 20 seconds. First, we define the right product, and then we work with the teams to build it right. We'll move from the problem space to the solution space in that order. And that's it. That's all the product manager does. And what makes a product right? Yeah, it has to make sense for the customer and also has to make sense for the company. And that's it. So now let's talk about product sense. There's a lot of definitions out there, and I picked my favorite one. It's defined by Shreyas Doshi. It's the ability to usually make the correct product decisions in the presence of ambiguity. I'm going to repeat that again. The ability to usually make correct product decisions in the presence of ambiguity. So what does that mean? It means having a sense on what the product should be and having a sense on what the product should do, even when there is no data. That is product sense. It's similar to common sense or spider sense. It's a knowing. You just know, even when there's no data. When there is a lot of data, of course, you can make good decisions, but it doesn't mean that you have good product sense because there's data. So people say you have to make data-driven decisions. That's correct. But it doesn't mean that you have good product sense. Product sense is a knowing of what the product should do, even when you don't have enough data. And that is what this interview is about. It's testing your ability to make the correct decisions when we don't have enough data. So let's break it down. What does it mean to make correct product decisions?
So help the product to focus on the correct customer need and also fulfill the company revenue goal.
Yes. Anyone else? What does it mean to make the correct product decisions?
I think plus one to what Chen said. Just to add to that, I think also, look at some do no harm metrics. Probably, if we are making a decision that probably doesn't harm the current infrastructure of what we have built. So that should be added to that.
Yes, love that. So let's start with the problem space. Everything starts from the problem space. In the problem space, this is where we demonstrate whether we could identify the right problem to solve. And what happens after the problem space? We move into solution space. Can you define the right solution? So again, we're just talking about the same thing here. What does a product manager do? We move from the problem space to the solution space. How do we demonstrate that we could make the correct product decisions? Again, we move from the problem space into the solution space, and that's how we approach product sense questions. Here's another way to visualize what it means to make the correct product decisions in the presence of ambiguity, when we don't have enough data, when we just know what the right decisions are. I like to think about it like a funnel. At the top of the funnel, this is where we're trying to understand the problem. Top of the funnel is a problem space. When things are ambiguous and there's a lot of problems we need to solve, and then we make decisions along the way. We're coming down the funnel. At the end of the funnel is the solution. This is when things real, when things get real, when we're trying to define what the list of features are. So we're starting from the top, problem space. This is where we're trying to understand all the user pain points, user problems. What are they motivated by? What do they need? What are they saying they need, but they don't really need? Or vice versa. Sometimes they don't tell us what they need because they don't know. So it's our job to understand what they actually need beyond what they're saying. So that is top of the funnel, user problems. Then when we have all the problems on the table, this is when we try to segment. Now we have to make decisions. What's the most important segment that we should focus on? This is where we're talking about making the right call, defining the right product. What makes sense for the customer and what makes sense for the company? What's the most important problem that is unmet for the customer, and what is a product decision that helps the business achieve business goals and helps the company differentiate? That is when we're segmenting. After we segment, then we have a strong understanding of what our product should be. This is where we come up with a product decision. And how do we come up with a product vision? We envision what the world would look and feel when our users start using our products. Most people just focus on a list of features, but that's not vision. Product vision is meant to be long-term. You're supposed to be painting a picture of what this new world looks and feels after your users start using the product. Don't forget the feelings, because people remember feelings a lot more than actual facts. I don't know if you have attended my previous CMU talk. It was about storytelling. So that was where I was talking about coming up with product vision in a way that resonates with people, focusing on the feeling aspect. So this is where you're painting a picture of how the world feels and why your users should join you in that new world. That is product vision. After that, then you start solutioning. When things get real, you come up with a list of features. You determine what goes in V1, V2, V3. You set goals for your product. What makes the product successful? What are your success metrics? How do you measure success? That all happens at the end of the funnel. But you don't do that until you have solved the user problem, you have segmented and picked the right segment, and then coming up with a product vision, and then your solution. This is just another way of visualizing, moving from the problem space into solution space. Top of the funnel is problem space. Bottom of the funnel is solution space. But we have to remember, it's not about the frameworks. This product sense interview is not about following frameworks. It's not about picking which framework is the best framework. It's not about that. There's a lot of different frameworks and they're all good. The one I showed you, I came up with it, but it's not the only framework. What is it really about? Let's go back to the definition. It's about our ability to make correct product decisions even when we don't have data. So that is how we tackle product sense questions. Now that we know what the interview is about, okay, question.
So, how would you say to practice your product sense. But within like, do you practice your product sense with doing a real project or preparing for this interview, doing a lot of questions and exercises? Which would you say is more helpful?
They're both helpful, and I will answer your question in the later part of the presentation. I'll get there. Okay, so now let's talk about the hiring manager's perspective. What do you think they're looking for?
People with great product sense.
Yes, for sure.
Value add to the company. Like they have their perspective. They want to find the traits in you that can actually add value to the team. The company goals.
Yes. So the first thing they look for is, of course, product thinking. It's a product sense interview. So the first important trait that you have to demonstrate is your product thinking. They want to know that we can identify the right product to build. This is problem space. Starting with the problem space before we moved into solution space. Number two, they need to know how we make our decisions, because they want to know how we're making decisions on the job. What is our decision based on? Is it based on strategic reasoning? Is it based on past experiences? How are we making these decisions? It can't be random. It can't be based on a feeling. It has to be based on something that is logical and it makes sense, even when we don't have data. So that is number two, decision-making skills. And number three, of course, it's communication. We need to show our ability to articulate ideas and explain complex concepts. Now, what happens in these interviews is our brain is moving a lot faster than our speech. And that's just natural. That's just how we're built. We have to take the hiring manager along with us on this journey. We have to explain how we think in a way that makes sense to them. That's why we have to communicate in a structured way. It's not that they're looking for structure. They're just trying to understand your thought process, but without structure, they can't follow us. So the framing here is not that they need us to be a structured communicator. That's just the approach that we use to take them along our journey with us, because we're thinking way faster than we talk, and that's natural. So we have to slow down and communicate and make sure that they can follow our thought process. And that's it. That's all we have to do in product sense interviews. So to summarize, 3 things that they look for: 1, product thinking; 2, decision making; and 3, clear and concise communication skills. When we ramble, when we're not concise in our communication, then we can't communicate our product thinking skills. We can't demonstrate our product thinking skills if our communication is not clear. We can't demonstrate our decision-making skills if our communication is not clear. So it's not that they need to evaluate our communication skills. What they really need is our product thinking and our decision-making skills. And the communication skill just helps us get there. That's how I would frame it. So now let's talk about what makes a candidate stand out. What do you think?
As a candidate, we need to know the product this company is actually developing, know the market fit that as a context of developing that product. And also we need to show that we have critical thinking while we are exploring the question.
Yes. So let's go back and let's use the same framework, because we like frameworks, we like structure. So in product thinking, in the bucket of product thinking, the way we stand out is using user empathy and then coming up with creative solutions. Why is user empathy important? This is how we communicate that we understand the user problems. With strong user empathy skills, we can feel the pain that they're feeling. And if we feel their pain, we could verbalize the problems that they're facing, and we could verbalize the motivations that they're facing, that they have. So they're motivated by something, but the world doesn't behave that way, and that's why they're having these problems. That is exercising our user empathy muscles. And after we have identified the right problem, then we put on our creative solutioning hat and we come up with creative solutions. That's how candidates stand out. For the first bucket, which is product thinking. Second bucket, decision making. It has to be based on insights, not based on data, because we don't have data. So what does the word insights mean? It means we have knowledge based on our past experiences. It means that we could hypothesize based on logic, based on strategic reasoning. We can't be making decisions randomly. It has to be because of an insight that we have. That's how we stand out in a decision making. Then, of course, clear and concise and effective communication skills. That's how we stand out. So let's talk about the best way to prepare. Hopefully this answers your question. So what have you been doing to prepare for these interviews? We talked about Exponent. We talked about books. What else? Mock interviews, yes. I would consider those prep 101. So you want to read books, you want to watch YouTube videos, and you definitely want to do mock interviews. Now, when I was prepping, we didn't have any YouTube videos, but we had books. So definitely recommend Cracking the PM Interview and Decode and Conquer, two of the most classic books that I think everyone should read. And YouTube channels. My favorite is Diana Yao's YouTube channel. Her videos are very high quality, and I love her decision-making skills. Very logical and very strategic. Highly recommend her videos if you haven't seen them already. That is Prep 101. What do you think Prep 201 is? That's 101.
Like actually having the interview.
Sorry?
Like actually going to an interview.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that that could be 201. I think 201 is exercising our product thinking muscles. When our muscles are strong, we naturally show up better in these interviews. It's just natural. It's organic because we have strong muscles. It's just like preparing for a race. You want to train before you race. If your muscles are strong, you show up better. It's the same concept. So how do we train our product thinking muscles? You could apply it to all areas of our lives.
So, without battery. Maybe just focus on, not focus, but like think about all the areas that you're interacting with your life.
Yes.
It doesn't have to necessarily be actually doing a project or a product. Just think of maybe the app that I use just now. Think of like what kind of things that I can improve. And then if I'm the product manager, what would I do next for it to be better?
Yes.
So all kinds of small things like that.
You got it. So let's say we want to improve this room that we're in. We're the PM for this room. Let's think about who the users are. What do you think the users need from this room? What do you think the users are motivated by? And what do you think the pain points are for the users of this room? And how might we improve this room for our users? That's an example of exercising product thinking muscles on a day-to-day. Now, after this talk, I'm going to go home. I'm going to commute. How might I improve my commute? Who are the users? It's not just about improving the car, because improving the car is not really what I'm after here. It's not about having a better car. It's about making the commute more enjoyable. That's what I care about. So I might, maybe if you interview me as a user, I might tell you, oh, my car needs this, my car needs that. But that's not what it's about. What it's really about is the experience that I'm having on the road. What I care about is the commute. And what I care about is the feeling I have during the commute and after, and maybe even before. Maybe I dread the commute so much. So what I'm really after is the feeling before, during, and after my commute. That's how we exercise our product thinking muscles on the day-to-day. And when I get home, maybe I need to make food for my kid. So how might I improve my kitchen? Who are the users of this kitchen? Am I a bachelor? Am I a mom? My use cases are different. My motivation is different. Do I use the kitchen to entertain my guests? Or do I use the kitchen to make healthy food for my family? Very different use cases. So that's how we exercise product thinking muscles on a day-to-day. When our muscles are strong, we naturally show up better in these interviews. We naturally feel more calm in these interviews when our muscles are strong. We are naturally better at thinking on our feet when we have never worked on a particular case study before. And that happens when our product thinking muscles are strong. Everyone has these muscles. Maybe some people have stronger muscles than others, but it doesn't matter because we can exercise these muscles. That way we naturally show up better. When our muscles are strong, we won't have to memorize any frameworks because we have done it every day. We don't have to memorize anything. It's not about the frameworks, right? It's about moving from the problem space into a solution space. When we do this all day, every day, it's going to come across very naturally. So that's Prep 201. And of course, there's Prep 301. You could work with someone who has been a hiring manager. You can work with someone who has conducted tens, hundreds, or even thousands of interviews. You can work with someone who has been on hiring committees so they could help you along the way. You can work with someone like me. I have a group coaching program where I help people strengthen their product thinking muscles. So I have a QR code here for anyone who is interested in learning more. What this program includes is a recorded component and a monthly live sessions component and bonus material. And I run the sessions every month. And that's how I keep growing my content library. I started with only 5 modules, and now I have over 20. So let me tell you more about what's in the content library. So there's a video on what makes a PM good versus average. If you know what good looks like, then you could apply it to your resume. Then you could apply it to your LinkedIn. Then you know what to talk about with hiring managers because now you know what good looks like. So that's the first module. I also share with you my take-home assignment when I was interviewing for Director of Product at Roku. In this take-home assignment, I talk about who am I? Why do I want this job? I talked about my favorite product and how might I improve it. And I also talk about the product that I'm the most proud of shipping. So it's 3 product thinking type of questions combined into one presentation. So you'll have that as guidance. And then, of course, case studies, mock interviews, and mock presentations to help you strengthen your product thinking muscles in a safe environment. And I also talk about applying product thinking to other areas of the PM job. Product thinking is not just about product sense interviews. Product thinking is all about problem solving and picking the right problem before we solve it. How do we apply it to behavior interviews? How do we apply product thinking to presenting to executives? How do we apply product thinking to getting buy-in? So in the content library, I've talked about using the strong muscles that we have on other areas of the PM job that makes you stronger as a PM. Now let's talk about the monthly live sessions. Next, in the next month, so October, month of October, I'm going to talk about applying product thinking to other areas that I haven't talked about yet. So for example, stakeholder management. How do we apply product thinking when we're managing stakeholders? What about getting promoted? What might that look like if we were to apply product thinking to getting that promotion that you want? It's all about treating yourself like a product. What is your roadmap to a promotion? And then onboarding your 30, 60, 90-day plan, which is all very important to help set you up for success as a good PM and not just an average PM. And we'll do 2 case study working sessions. Working session means we work on it together. So we're not time bound. We are not forced to solve a case study under 30 minutes. We take our time, so we really strengthen those muscles. That's how it works when we're doing strength training. And 2 mock interviews or presentations and 2 office hours and Q&A. So that kind of summarizes what's in the content library that's already recorded and what's included in the monthly live sessions. I also have bonus videos. One video from Diana Chen, who's a product executive from Lyft and Amazon. And another video from Minal Mehta, who's the CEO of a platform called All Takes. It's a startup. And she was an executive from YouTube, Google, and LinkedIn. And the reason why I asked them to help me with this group program is because I know my way of product thinking is largely biased by Meta. It's not the only way. So I wanted to invite other executives from other tier 1 tech companies to share with you their point of view so you get a diverse view on what product thinking means in all the tech tier 1 tech companies. And last but not least, you have access to all the content, including new sessions that I add in the future. So it's very different from a cohort-based group coaching program. We don't really graduate. We meet month after month. And that's how training works, right? We can't just stop training. We keep going. So that's another perk about my group coaching program. Hopefully that answers your question on how to prep. So now I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about product sense interviews or being a PM or execution interviews or behavior interviews, anything. What questions can I answer for you? Yes.
Can you please elaborate a bit on how the interview process changes with the scale of the company? For example, if I'm applying to a startup or a big scale company, how the process would vary?
Yeah. So if the startup has people from big tech companies, they'll follow a very similar process because that's how they were trained. But if the startup doesn't have these people from big tech companies, it will be very fluid and it would not be standardized. So they could ask you all kinds of different questions. I would say more behavioral questions than the structured case study questions because they weren't trained that way.
So I had a question regarding product sense interviews and the beginning part of it where we kind of clarify with the interviewer if we are on the same page about something, a problem statement given.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, sorry. Yeah. So oftentimes you have seen interviewer, when you ask clarifying questions, they just, leave it open-ended, right? They say that it depends on you.
Yeah.
So in those situations, how do you strategically navigate it in a way so that, you as an interviewer, you are on the, easier side so that the case is not super difficult for you, but also it's high quality so that you actually get through the interview?
I will first talk about why the interviewer doesn't give you direction. Because as a PM, we are not order takers. We're the ones setting direction. So for that reason, why should the interviewer give us direction? That's not the job. So hopefully that gives you a sense on why they do this. So second part of the question is how. Well, that is how we demonstrate product sense. That is the interview. I would say the beginning portion of the product sense interview is way harder than the second half of the question. First half of the question is problem space. Second half of the question is solution space. And solutioning is easier than breaking down the problem. So how do we do it? There's frameworks that we could use. So you want to come up with all kinds of different problems that the user might be having. And then you want to evaluate which one is more important and what is more painful and what is unmet in a way that ladders up to the company mission. If you ask yourself those questions, it naturally helps you narrow down the space. And you want to tell the interviewer, okay, I have all these problems, but I'm going to narrow it down. And my criteria is X, Y, and Z. That way we don't sound random.
Can I ask a small follow-up?
Okay.
So I've been in a situation in a mock interview where I've been given a really wacky kind of a question, like improve an airport. And in the clarifying question, obviously, like one of the most common clarifying question is, are we operating under some kind of constraints? Usually the answer is no. And then what I ask is, do we have a timeline to launch, right? And if that is also left open-ended by the interviewer, and we are not even sure at this point what we are going to build, how do we even set a timeline, or do we just say, let me just circle back to this once we are through with the case?
Why do we need to set a timeline?
To understand the technical bandwidth that we have and have a goal. So
that comes later, right? That's solution space. Stick to the problem space. We don't care about constraints. That's not what the problem is about. The constraint is about the solution. Also, when we're asking clarifying questions, there's a difference between clarifying the question versus asking for direction. If we're asking for direction, it shows that we can't think on our own. We have to follow orders. But it's okay to ask clarifying questions. So for example, where is this airport? How big is this airport? Is it a commercial airport? Is it an international airport? Is it a private airport? That is a very different type of clarifying question than what are our constraints? What's the timeline? What are constraints and timeline? That is asking for direction. Any other questions?
What are some of the things which you would say we shouldn't do while giving an interview, which are like just a no-no for the interviewers?
Right. Don't ask for direction. Don't start with solutioning. Always start in the problem space. Let me think what else. Don't ramble. Make sure you think before you speak. The other thing I would say is I'm gonna assume in a product sense interview, it's a 45-minute interview. They only ask you one question. What does that mean? Let's subtract Q&A time and introduction time. We should allocate 30 minutes for these products and questions. Your monologue needs to be 30 minutes. So imagine if you ask for direction and they scope it way down for you, you could probably answer it in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Then what do you do for the rest of 15 minutes? You run out of things to talk about. So when we're practicing, we have to be very comfortable with what 30 minutes feels like. We have to build it into our body so we know, okay, this is how roughly 5 minutes feels like. This is roughly how 10 minutes feels like. And I recommend that we allocate 20 minutes in the problem space and 10 minutes in the solution space. That's how important the problem space is. And that's even more important the more senior we get. Solutioning becomes secondary as long as we identify the right problem in a way that makes sense for the customer, in a way that makes sense for the company.
I think most of the people are still in the resume building stages.
Sure.
So can you talk about like what do you see in the resume?
Yeah. So I'm going to repeat what I said before. What does a PM do? We identify the right problem to build, and then we work with the team to build it right. So how do we know if we built something right? Well, right means it makes sense for the customer and it makes sense for the company. But how do we know that? We use metrics to demonstrate that something was right. So in a resume, you have to highlight the actual outcome of your work. We don't talk about how we did the work. That's not the emphasis of the resume. What makes a PM good is someone who actually had results. Results as in we built the right product and we built it right. How do we know that? It was through our success metrics. So in our resumes, we have to show our impact in terms of success metrics because it's a proxy to know that we built the thing right. So that's very important when we're looking at resumes. And the resume has to be very relevant to the job. When the market is good, companies are hiring generalists. But when the market is not as good, they're looking for someone whose experience is very relevant. So we don't want to talk about general things unless they're looking for generalists. We want our resume to be very relevant for this company. This is where you have to study the job description like it's the Bible. You have to really understand what they're looking for. You have to read between the lines. You have to put more time into understanding the job description and understanding the company culture. And you weave that into your resume.
But what about the internship and product, new graduate roles? Like those are quite generic in the job description itself.
Well, then you just have to demonstrate that you have been showing impact and that you could do the job. If it's general and you don't have a lot of information to go on, then you go back to the basics. What makes a product manager good? We can identify the problem and we could solve it. So that's how I would frame my resume.
Any more questions?
So I've seen that most of us are trying to put keywords onto a resume. Does the ATS thing actually happens? Do they actually map all the keywords and they find the top resumes?
Yes.
So we should optimize for that?
Yeah, we should. But don't just optimize for machine because that's just step one. When you pass step one, now a human being has to read it. So your resume also needs to be readable. So you have to optimize for machine and people.
Gotcha. There you go, bro.
Hello. Yeah. So my question is not about product sense interviews, but just product management in general.
Sure.
So a lot of us are starting out as early career PMs. So you have worked with many great PMs, and I was just curious, like, what are some of the non-obvious traits that you have seen in world-class PMs versus other PMs, and how do you ensure longevity in this career?
The PMs who really stand out, they're really self-aware. So they do a lot of self-reflection. They're always trying to think back to that meeting that I just held. How did I come across? How did I make people feel? When I'm herding cats, how did I come across? How do I make people feel? If there's a weakness that I have, how do I address it? If I receive feedback from management that talks about one of my weaknesses, what is my plan to address that weakness? So they're very good at self-reflection. Now this is assuming, everyone has what it takes to be a PM, right? So if the playing field is even, the ones who stand out are the ones who are very self-aware and very proactive. When we're not self-aware, then we kind of just go into this mechanical pattern, and we're not reflecting, and we're not adapting to a new environment.
Could you share about one of your favorite products that you've worked on? Maybe like one at Roku and then one at Meta? Or pre-Meta, maybe it was like something that was not,
Yeah, I love this question because my favorite product is not a product that was used by millions of users. My product was a transportation app for Meta employees. Meta employees at that time was only in the thousands. Now, why did I pick this product over Facebook groups that I worked on that had millions of users? It's because my definition of favorite is when I feel that I actually did something that's very good for people. So let me tell you about this transportation app. This was way before COVID when everyone's commuting to work. And Facebook's headquarters is in the city of Menlo Park. When there's thousands of employees and thousands of guests and vendors going into the headquarters office in Menlo Park, what do you think happens to the road? There's a lot of cars, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of noise in the streets of Menlo Park. And when there's a lot of cars, what do you think happens to the parking lot? There's no room. There's no parking. How does that make employees feel? Maybe one day is fine, but how does that make employees feel day after day, week after week, month after month? When you're commuting every day for hours, bumper to bumper, you don't show up well at work because you're already tired. And then you have to go through the same thing again when you get home. And you're not there for your family because you're drained. And the city of Menlo Park is not happy that there's so many cars on the road because now it's very costly for the city to maintain. And the residents of that city is also not happy because the streets are clogged. So the city of Menlo Park gave Facebook a mandate to keep the number of cars below a threshold. But it was impossible because Facebook was hiring so many people at that time. And Facebook was building a lot of buildings in the city of Menlo Park. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we get people to stop driving. How do we get people to start driving? We have to now drive them to work. So if they don't drive, then the company has to drive them to work. That's why Facebook has shuttles. That's the real reason why Facebook has shuttles, is to keep the number of cars low. But it's also kind of painful to take the shuttles. There was no technology solution that helps you figure out how to get to work if you don't drive. Where's my shuttle? Is it late? Or did I miss it? Where is the shuttle stop? There's so many unknowns that makes the adoption of the transportation program really low. But there was a real business problem that Facebook needed to figure out so that employees stopped driving. So I was hired to work on this new transportation app to improve the adoption of the transportation program. Now, at the time, there was only shuttles, but now with an app, it's easier to take the shuttles because now you know exactly where the shuttles are and where the stops are. And then you can also use the app to find carpool partners. You can use the app to van pool, and you can use the app to figure out which ferry to take if you're coming from North Bay. So why is that my favorite product? It's because I saw the emotional shift in employees after they adopted the transportation program. When we don't have to drive, we're no longer drained, and we can use that time to do work on the shuttles or other things. We can use that time to call our friends. We can use that time to listen to chat, to do many other things other than driving alone. So when I saw that shift in people, I realized I was giving time back to the people. Now, time should be the most precious thing that we have as humans because we just lose time. It's very hard to gain time. If you look at any of the apps on your phone, they probably all take time away from you. They're all driving adoption. They're driving your engagement. They want you to be their DAU. But the app that I worked on actually gave time back to the people. And plus, it's green for the planet, sustainability. But the real shift and the reason why it's my favorite is because now with more time, you're more in control. You show up better at work and you show up better at home. And that is my favorite product of all time.
Thank you so much, Nancy. We have time for one more question. Anyone have questions about life at Roku, Meta, anything? Ended on the best question of the no, just kidding. We ended on a great question. We have a thank you gift for you, Nancy.
Oh no way.
We're so thrilled. Yeah, do you mind? Yeah. As a fellow CMU Tartan, we have a gift.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, it's fun stuff to wear.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're gonna take a group photo, y'all. Can we give Nancy a round of applause?
Thank you.